and as his family, I'm not going to speak for my parents, but I know my mom, 6.5 years later, still hasn't faced some of our extended family members because she doesn't want to talk about that because she knows they will judge him only for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had a moment when I started the Grief and Light podcast that I got invited to do a speech for Overdose Awareness Day. They were doing, the mayor was coming to the University of Miami. They were doing a proclamation. They wanted me to be the speaker. And I said, I don't know if I'm ready to say the things out loud. So when I accepted, it was because the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the same shame that kept my brother at zero was the shame that was keeping me from speaking about it. And what he wanted his whole life was for everybody to see him as the human being, not the person with this problem.
He wasn't an addict. He was a human who wrestled with addiction. Those are two
Right.
very different things. Yeah. Hello, my grieving friend. It's Lisa. Whether you're a longtime listener or you're tuning in for the first time, welcome to Grief is a Sneaky Bitch podcast. I'm so glad you're here. By now, you likely know I'm passionate about exploring the nature of grief. As a narrative therapy trained social worker, a grief activist, and a widow, I'm dedicated to helping us learn to be in relationship with our grief instead of running from it. In our modern culture, we've pushed grieving into the shadows, something to be experienced privately, causing us to suffer unnecessarily and in isolation. Grief is our human inheritance. It offers us medicine if we tend to it as a community. So together with my extraordinary guests, and this season answering your questions too, we're changing the narratives of grief, one conversation at a time. I'm so delighted to bring you my conversation with Nina Rodriguez today. As you'll hear in a moment, this young woman has accomplished a lot, and she's contributing in such a beautiful way to our shared mission to create a more grief-literate world. Yet, one of the things you may not hear in her bio, though you will definitely get to know in our conversation today, is the way she meaningfully carries her grief with so much care. She honors the love she holds for her brother Joseph, even in a world that often dismisses or diminishes deaths that result from addiction. Nina is a grief-informed guide, indie podcaster, host and founder of Grief and Light, a platform and podcast dedicated to fostering a more grief-informed, hopeful world through honest conversations about, well, life after loss. Following the sudden passing of her only sibling in 2019, Nina launched the Grief and Light podcast to shine a truthful light on a grief as a lived experience to honor, tend, and integrate rather than something to fix. Does that sound familiar? That's why we are such kindred spirits. Now in its fourth season, the show has earned a 2025 Women Who Podcast Magazine Award and ranks 18th of 100 on Goodpods in the grief category. You can learn even more about her impressive bio in the show notes, but for now, let's dive right into our beautiful conversation. Welcome, Nina Rodriguez, to Grief is a Sneaky Bitch podcast. I'm so honored that you're here.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Listeners heard that we've had conversations off the air, well, on the air on your show, Grief and Light, as part of Conversations for Reimagine. But I'm delighted to bring your wisdom and your heart to our audience here at Grief is a Sneaky Bitch podcast. And as a listener, I know you know the question I love to explore at the beginning of every conversation as a way to help create a more grief-literate world. I ask each of us to dive into our earliest memory of loss so that we might begin to understand where do we form the beliefs we hold about grief, and to use that knowledge to discern, are those beliefs serving me? Are they not? Not as a criticism to our parents, but just as an opportunity to be a part of creating a more grief rich, grief literate culture. So, can you take us back to an early memory of loss and where would you like to begin?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. It's beautiful. And the memory that comes back is the one loss that changed the course of my life to what it is now. And that is the loss of my only sibling. His name's Joseph. The day after we celebrated his 32nd birthday, this was back in September 2019, he died unexpectedly. And prior to that, I understood I had a relationship with kind of melancholy. I'd like to say I'm a bit of a Wednesday Adam vibe at times. So I didn't know to call that grief because there were some other lived experiences that fall under the grief category,
Yeah,
but I didn't know to call it that. It wasn't until it was a clear cut separation
yeah,
of that connection. My brother's no longer here. We are now a family of four. We meaning my parents, sibling, and I. And what does that mean for me? And it wasn't until a former colleague asked me, well, she didn't ask. She said in a very casual comment, well, now that you're an only child, and then her words faded into the background and it felt like a gut punch. It was the most disorienting comment ever because it spoke to that shift in identity that I did not know was a part of grief. And so that is one of the many things that unearthed my understanding and my journey of what is grief? What
yeah,
do I believe about grief? And realizing that the lived experience of this loss is so different from what people expect it to be.
yeah,
I got so many comments of, you just got to look at the bright side. You just have to have kids so your parents are happy again. He would want you to be happy. He's in a better place. My brother struggled with addiction, and another person I used to work with said, "Oh, well, what did you expect?" That was her condolences. So, right, and I'm laughing
If you're
about it now
listening and
because
not watching this on YouTube, I just rolled my eyes so hard they almost fell out of my head. Okay, sorry, continue.
it's one of those, like, what not to say. It was
Yeah,
just a slew of what not to say, which is interesting because during his memorial, or, when we held his memorial and then his funeral, there was this older gentleman who kept telling my parents and I not to rush. He said, "Just take it in. This is the final time you're going to see him in physical
yeah,
form. Don't
yeah,
rush this." And he said it with such personal care that I asked him, "What do you mean?" And then my dad was next to me. He said, "If you had any advice for somebody in our shoes, what would you say?" And
mm,
he said, "I was in your shoes. I lost my son many years ago." And it turns out he volunteers at the funeral home to help, with the right, with the events and the setup and everything, because that's how he channeled his grief. We didn't understand any of this at the time. It was just this
yeah,
nice old man helping us out. And the answer to the question that my dad asked, which was, what advice would you have? Is he said, people will tell you the darndest things. Just look at them and say, you have no idea what you're talking about, and never take it personal and just
yeah,
walk away
yeah,
because
yeah,
they just won't understand.
yeah,
And in a way, that's a good thing.
yeah,
So that was eye-opening, but we didn't understand the fullness of that comment until we were on the receiving end of endless, and even my parents more so, they got the weirdest comments from people who I want to believe were well-meaning and well-intentioned and trying to care in some way, shape, or form. But it boggled my mind, speaking of grief beliefs, why
yeah,
was this such a jarring experience when we need the most support? Why did it feel like we had to all of a sudden be on the defensive side of this situation,
mm,
constantly explaining ourselves, constantly explaining why we can or can't, or constantly being lectured by people that are not in our shoes about silver linings and and he wouldn't want you to this and life is this and life is, and all of a sudden everybody has a explanation to the meaning of life and it lands somewhere between hurry up and get over it and I'm tired of hearing about this.
yeah,
So that experience, my former colleagues comment, all these things set me into this like spiral of, I don't know if it's a spiral. It's like it's just curiosity about
yeah,
what the heck is this grief thing?
Yeah.
And why does it feel like we're just walking with two left feet, like in random directions, because it's the most awkward
Yeah.
conversation and the interaction between the people who have experienced loss and the ones who have not. And that includes friends and family.
Yeah.
So to answer that is I didn't have, well, I'll take that back. I was going to say I didn't have any grief beliefs. I believed I would be over it, quote unquote, and I'm using air quotes here,
Yeah.
8 weeks, 10 weeks, because that's like a long time. That's like plenty of time, right? 8, 10 weeks rolls around 12 weeks, and I am panicking because it is worse than ever, and
Yeah.
it's only intensifying. So I call one of my girlfriends who lost her mother 10 months prior, and she says, "Oh, honey," because I asked her, like, "When does
Yeah.
this end? How did you do it? I need to get rid of this. I can't do this." And
Yeah.
she says, "Oh, honey,
Yeah.
I am in the grocery store, of course, and I'm in the baking aisle looking for little things for to make cookies with my kids, and I'm sobbing. I was sobbing 2 seconds ago because it reminded me of my mom, and she's not here, and this is grief at 10 months."
Yeah.
I said to her, I said, "Thank you." We ended the conversation, and I said, "Oh, that's her. That doesn't have to be me because,
Right.
that's her over there, over yonder.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be me." 10 months roll around. She's exactly right,
Yeah.
and it dawned on me that we are either taught, conditioned to,
Right.
we absorb messaging that you are to feel well at all times. If you're not feeling well and great and productive and joyful at all times, something's wrong with you. And grief doesn't always feel great. Let's just say it that way. Like when
Yeah.
your person dies, you don't feel great. So 10 weeks, 10 months, 10 years, and on and on and on. What I've learned since it's now 6.5 years since, and what I've learned since is you build a relationship with this grief. It's like a roommate you never wanted. It moves in. You have to learn to live with it. It's really painful and annoying and disruptive, and then it's just kind of weird. And then some days it's actually friendly, and other days it's just like, what are you still doing here? And it shifts over time.
Yeah.
But to answer your question about those grief beliefs, there was a lot of unlearning in the beginning
Yeah.
and relearning and understanding that this whole process involves so much grace, extending grace to yourself and each other, and relearning what that even means in order to be able to literally survive. Because in the hierarchy of loss that a lot of people have in their minds, sibling loss is one of those that is not at the forefront. If anything, it's like at the bottom.
Yeah.
Barely anybody thinks of it. A lot of people I found have contentious relationships with their siblings or not the best relationships
Yeah.
with their siblings. So they don't see why that would be a terrible loss to somebody
Yeah.
or how that disorients your sense of identity in the world. So, very long winded answer to
No.
say that it's a huge unlearning. You think you don't have grief biases, but you do. There's a lot of self-imposed pressure to get over it, to find some type of joyful footing, to get back to normal, whatever normal is. And the moment you realize that normal is not coming back, not the way you knew it to be, the moment you realize you have to build something completely different from the shattered pieces, essentially, and integrate everything that just happened, that's when your biases start to come to the surface.
Yeah.
And in my case, I learned to stand in my own truth over the course of, I would say it took me like 3 years to really understand what I really believed and where I stood the strongest. Because when people throw their beliefs at you, and
Yeah.
the "you should be over it by now," and you're still grieving 2 years later, you're still grieving. I got that one.
Mhm.
After the holidays, like January 10th or something, I met with somebody and they said, "You're still sad?" Well, um, it's interesting how this all works and learning not to absorb that. That's when you realize I had beliefs, I had to unlearn them, I had to relearn, and now I have to stand in my truth, and that takes a
Yeah.
bit of time.
Yeah. Oh, Nina, you offered up thank you so much. You offered up so much wisdom, and there's some themes that I just wanna name as a placeholder because I wanna come back to them. I mean, one is the identity loss that we experience, which is one of those I would put in the category of secondary losses that people don't quite expect, to come and part of what we have to grapple with, but also the fact that we develop a relationship with our grief. I think is a theme I've spoken about on the show and certainly write about, but I wanna explore that with you. But before we move from that, and just some of the ways in which you learn to stand in your truth so that you could, not receive personally any of the what I filed in the chapter, "People Say Stupid Shit" in my book, the things that people say, I wanna just take a moment to bring Joseph into the room. Just wonder what's a quality or a memory or something that you carry or try to inhabit or that you want our listeners to know about him?
He brought so much lightness into our lives.
Mm,
He always found a way to make a very serious situation funny, just naturally without even trying. He was very curious and had an incredible sense of justice, of what justice was in the world. Probably part of the reason why he was so emotionally impacted by many things and injustices.
yeah.
Um, Even with him struggling with addiction, it's he's somebody that really cared. He cared about people, he cared about animals a lot.
Okay.
He loved learning. He loved history. He was one of those, like, "Did you know people?" Like,
Yeah.
"Did you know about this? Did you know about that?" Like, he
You're
had
like,
all the
"No, but
fun
thank you."
facts.
Yeah.
He's the reason that I know what a tardigrade is, which is a little
Oh,
microscopic, they call it water bear. It's a microscopic creature that can live in space. It's the only one that can live in space. I wouldn't know
yeah.
that had it not been for my
Thank you,
board.
Joseph, and now we all know that.
Now
Yeah.
we all know that. He had this phrase called LLPs, which, it stood for life's little pleasures, and in a
Mm,
nutshell, what that meant is he knew how to be in the present. There's so many times that my parents and I corrected him, and, we were like, "Oh, don't do that," or "Stay focused on this, you have to do this is the way forward, this is the path forward," and we're
yeah.
very intense about, like, "These are the steps forward." After his passing, actually the other night, we were sitting around the fire. It was a cold day here in Florida, which is like a average day anywhere else, but, like, it was cold to
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, I
We
bet.
had the outdoor fire pit, and my mom said, "What would you say to Joseph if he were here today?" And I
Mm,
said that he was right about everything, that he understood the deeper meaning of life, that he really understood what it meant to be present, to be human, and to deeply care about the things that actually matter in life, not these superficial, um, let me not to some people, they're a big deal,
yeah.
but,
Yeah.
the things that we tend to aim for that is more external rather than internal.
Yeah.
So those LLPs that would look like if I'm talking to you, I'm like, "Hey, Lisa, let's go have a conversation," but the sun is out. And he's like, "Okay, let's go have the conversation outside because
Yeah.
it's a beautiful sunny day."
Yeah.
Or um, if we're inside, watching TV, he would say, like, "Let's go ride our bikes. Let's go be outside and
Yeah.
enjoy the LLPs." So in a way, it was his way of communing with life.
Yeah.
He loved the outdoors. He was funny. He was just really funny, and he gave the best bear hugs.
Mm,
I have a bit of an anxious spirit, or had, because I'm working on that. And he would just know exactly when I was feeling that way without me having to say anything, and one of his bear hugs would just bring me back to center, and he knew
yeah.
exactly when I needed that. So, very attuned, very kind, gentle, wise soul who was also troubled by a lot of things of this
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate the richness of your description. It felt very I could picture it, I could feel it, I could sense it, um, which I just love, and I think to anybody listening who's in early grief, which, by the way, can be a year, 2 years, depending on, um, sometimes the recalling of our person is so tied to how they died or the
Mhm.
moment of their death. And what I want you to hear, newer griever, is that there will be a time where not that tears won't come or emotion won't come, but part of how we build the relationship with our person and our grief means we get to call to and share with others, the world, even ourselves, our family members, these qualities that we can almost feel viscerally. And you just really modeled that so beautifully right now. And also, I think listeners, you can probably agree, we're all going to be thinking about LLPs from now on, life
I
little
would love that.
pleasures. I really love that so much. Thank you, Joseph. And thank you to you for bringing that
Thank you so
into the
much for
room.
making the space, and yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's one of the ways he lives on. And to clarify, because you mentioned about the endpoint for the listeners, he died because of substance-related causes. He was in recovery for almost 2 years, and he had, my guess, we don't know exactly what happened that day, but my guess it has something to do with his birthday. Maybe somebody gave him something,
Yeah.
and his life ended.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you that, that's I don't think he saw that coming. I even had a dream with him the week after or about 10 days after, where he came to me in a dream and he says, "How do I come back?" And I said, "You can't." And we were both
Mhm.
crying. And I said, "You can't. I'm so sorry. You have to go now and find the light." I said
Yeah.
that in the
Yeah.
dream. And his tombstone actually says, I'm going to say it in Spanish and then I'll
Yeah.
translate it.
Please.
Que la luz divina illumina tu camino. And it means, may the divine light illuminate your path or guide your path,
Mm.
right? That's
Yeah.
a phrase that came to my mom when she was meditating on what should go on there.
Yeah.
So there's a theme with this whole light, like grief and light
Yeah.
and
Yes, I love that.
the path forward.
Well, thank you for sharing a little bit of the details. I always
Mhm.
leave that as an option for my guests because you may have heard me say before, on the one hand, I don't want to contribute to the sort of voyeuristic, culture that sort of the Kardashian TV culture that
Right.
we have about looking into people's lives. And yet,
Yeah.
and listeners know I'm a both and person, and yet, death will come for all of us. All of us will have that in our lives. And part of what you alluded to earlier is that we don't have practice. We're not exposed to it. So then we think something's wrong with us when we want to talk about it or process it. So on the one hand, I'm not digging for dirt or looking to be voyeuristic. On the other hand, I want to be a safe place. And I imagine you offer this as well on your show to allow us to muddle our way through practicing what it's like to talk about the hardest things,
Yeah.
that happen in our lives. But Nina, I wanted to hear from you, or I'm curious to know what you've discovered or reflected over these last 6 years about the particularities of an unexpected death loss.
Yeah.
And I just want to frame for grievers, of course, listeners, grieve, you can grieve non-death losses and all kinds of losses. And this isn't about competing in the grief Olympics or qualifying for, where yours is, but different losses bring different qualities of experiences. And so I'm curious, both with an unexpected death like Joseph's, but also sometimes a death that is related to things that often get stigmatized in our
Yeah.
culture, like addiction. What have you learned now, and how's that different maybe than when he first died, about the nature of your own grief experience, meaning grieving him, and also just how the world does or doesn't see your lived experience of grief?
Thank you for that question. So much is the short answer, and I'm
We
still
have
learning.
time, so take your time, yeah.
But when he died of fentanyl poisoning, I
Okay,
didn't find that out for 6 months because that's when
okay,
we got the report. We kept
okay.
calling. It was also the pandemic, so things were a little slowed down and
Yeah,
weird times, really weird times.
yeah,
So, when I saw that and I realized that is something that he tried to overcome, that was his biggest hurdle in life. He said, "I wish people would understand that if you look at levels, right, and you're at level 0, ground level, people who struggle with addiction have to climb up from -20 every single day just to get to 0,
Mhm.
while the rest of the world only sees them at 0. And he said, "You have no idea what I had to do to get to level 0
Mm.
because I had to climb from the depths every single day of my life."
Wow.
So to be judged for being a 0 in life adds to the burden, the shame, and the stigma
Yeah.
of living with addiction. And he says, "Nobody sees me for the good, they only see the addict, and I
Mm.
am more than an addict." So, we understood that as his family. We knew
Yeah.
how beautiful and truly one of the most pure, heart-centered people I've ever known, and I'm not just saying that because
Yeah.
he's my brother. He really had the kindest heart. So, when you lose somebody to a substance-related cause, whether it be opiates,
Yeah.
alcohol, whatever,
Yeah.
people tend to write them off and their entire life off. And almost like that comment that I got from
Yeah.
somebody that used to be a former boss of mine, very intelligent person. This is not somebody who doesn't think about what they say. And their comment was, "Well, what did you expect?" So have their life minimized in that way is um, soul crushing
Yeah.
as his sister. And as his family, I'm not going to speak for my parents, but I know my mom, 6.5 years later, still hasn't faced some of our extended family members because she doesn't want to talk about that because she knows they will judge him only for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had a moment when I started the Grief and Light podcast and everything that I got invited to do a speech for, um, forgetting the name right now, for Overdose Awareness Day. They were
Okay.
doing, the mayor was coming to the University of Miami. They were doing a proclamation. They wanted me to be the speaker. And I said, "I don't know if I'm ready to say
Yeah.
the things out loud." So when I accepted, it was because the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the same shame that kept my brother at 0
Yeah.
was the shame that was keeping me from speaking about it. And what he wanted his whole life was for everybody to see him as the human being,
Yeah.
not the person with this problem.
He wasn't an addict, he was a human who wrestled with addiction. Those are two
Correct.
very different things. We'll be right back with more of this beautiful conversation. My hope is that this show feels like a safe space to be inside your grief. Remember, you don't need to do this alone. Your grief is valid and a normal response to loss. And the truth is, we live in a grief illiterate culture, which makes navigating this process more challenging than it needs to be. As a narrative therapy trained social worker and student of grief education and ritual, I'm here to walk alongside you. I'll offer you a place to feel seen and held and help you discover skills and practices for being with both grief and joy. Let me be your guide. If you're interested in learning more about individual grief support with me, you can visit lisakeefauver.com after the show today. That's Lisa, KeeFauver.com. Yeah.
And as Dr. Gabor Mate, I know a lot of people either
Yeah.
love or hate him, but I
Yeah.
tend to agree with this part is that you don't ask why the addiction, you ask why the pain.
Yeah.
When you dig beyond the addiction is a coping mechanism.
Yes. Yeah.
So when you dig beneath that, there is a lot of pain, suffering, and trauma, and all these other things that
Yeah.
um, are usually at the root. So when it dawned on me that it was the same shame that kept him at 0, the one that was keeping me from speaking, I said, "Oh, no, no, no. I, as his sister, the one thing that I can reclaim because he's gone
Yeah.
is his narrative and the way that we speak about him and present him to the world, the way that his light gets to shine through me." And I said, "I will not let shame about any of this. obscure the reality. I will also not deny what happened
Yeah.
because it's that's what ended his life. So, it's this and that, like you say,
Both and.
both
Yeah,
and.
yeah. Yeah.
So, since then spoke to a lot of other siblings who also lost siblings to stigmatized losses, and they said, "But that was a part of their story too, and it's okay to say that."
Yeah.
And the moment I reclaim the shame, it's not that it doesn't hurt, it hurts me as I'm talking about it right now,
Yeah.
and I get to also say the other part of the story,
Yeah.
the rest of the story, and he gets to be remembered not just by the end point. Somebody reminded me of that poem, like, "Life is the dash." You know, have you heard that poem, "The
Yeah.
Dash"? Yes, so it's the
Yeah.
beginning and the end date, but more importantly, the dash, and it's that
Yeah.
everything that happened in between. So that's on the stigmatized part. The
Yeah.
reclaiming is very personal. It took me years. Initially, I said he died of a heart attack, or I didn't know because we didn't have all the paperwork, which was
Yeah.
true initially. And then at one point, I just started saying it, and you would and I almost find it humorous now when I say it. Then
Yeah.
my not my dad, oh, God forbid, my brother passed away from fentanyl poisoning, and the look on people's faces, it's like, "Whoa." And then they have no further questions, Your Honor.
Yeah.
So now it's almost, it makes me giggle a little bit, but that is part of the reclaiming.
Yeah.
Now, I don't disclose that to everybody. Not
Yeah.
everybody's entitled to that information, and I don't always engage in this conversation, even as somebody who speaks openly about this. There
Yeah.
are days and there are days, and there are
Yeah.
people and there are people and there are moments and there are moments. So,
And it's your story to tell, and how much and when and what details is your prerogative. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
that took me, I would say, like 3.5 years to be able to stand on my own 2 feet and say, "This is my truth, and this is the truth." So, and this is how I'm choosing to share it.
Yeah.
So, that's to the stigmatized part. The sudden loss part, I struggled with, wow, it's like you were mid-sentence and everything, just like a song you really liked, and
Yeah.
it was like, "Yeah, you're rocking out to it, it's great, blah, blah," and all of a sudden it just goes quiet, and you're like, what happened?" Like, the lights
Yeah.
go out, music stops, you're just alone in this room, like, "What happened? Where did everything go?" So, for the longest time, I struggled with, "Where did you go? I still have your shoes. I'm cleaning out the cup that you were drinking. Your backpack is here. Your
Yeah.
watch is here. Where did you go?" Right? Like, and obviously, we know what happens after somebody dies in terms of the physical. Some people have religious and spiritual beliefs. Great. Those serve me no purpose. Those
Yeah.
were zero comfort afterwards because you could have read every Bible verse, every
Yeah.
thrown every spiritual belief at me, every science fact about consciousness, whatever. None of it made sense, and I did not care. It was
Yeah.
like, "Where did you go?" So, when I started having dreams about him and seeing signs, I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
A dear friend of mine said, "Look out for the signs," and I was like, "What sign? What are you where are they? What are you talking
Oh,
about?" She said,
yeah.
"Ask for a sign," and that's when I started opening up because I was honestly desperate
Yeah.
for some sort of connection. Seeing my mom, seeing my dad, seeing my extended family just completely devastated. Nobody had words for each, we didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So, I wondered, would it have been better if the person had a long drawn out passing?
I know. Yeah.
Maybe I get to, it sucks, but at least I would have gotten to say goodbye. So I
Yeah.
thought,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
those, at least, until I met people whose loved ones struggled with an extended passing of
Yeah.
whatever sort. And they said, it's like holding sand through your fingers, and there's nothing you can do about it, and the person's fading in front, they're both horrible.
Yeah.
So it dawned on me that sudden passing, prolonged passings, expected quote unquote passing, they
Yeah.
all suck. They're
Yeah.
horrible,
Yeah.
and they all carry some sort of burden and a certain element that you wouldn't wish on anybody.
Yeah.
So,
I really appreciate that, Nina, that reminder, as I said it sort of earlier in the conversation about I don't think there needs to be a grief Olympics, although we like to, uh, create that often. Um, and just understanding what are the particulars, So for somebody who had a prolonged grief, the burden maybe or the challenge was feeling helpless in the face of a, deterioration. And that's not something that somebody experienced an unexpected death has. On the
Right.
other hand, the person with the unexpected death didn't maybe get to say the things they wanted to say or finish the conversation or, yeah. And that's just as an awareness to all of us that um, I so appreciate the way you have compassion for each other person's kind of experience. So that's where it comes to me. I don't know if you've thinking about this, Nina, but this is where I think the truth of every grief journey is unique is true. Not that there aren't lessons that we can't learn, that there aren't themes, that there aren't ways in which things look familiar across losses, across people, is your relationship with your person is different. The type of loss, even if you were talking to somebody else who lost a sibling, is different. And so we just want to start from knowing what is our loss and what is our experience. Yeah.
And I'd like to make a comment on that, if I
Yeah.
may.
Yeah.
Adult sibling loss is one of those things I also learned early on is incredibly understudied to this day,
Yeah.
incredibly misunderstood, and highly disregarded or minimized or muted as a grief experience. I'm hoping to change that. That's part of why I have these conversations. It's in one to create awareness and to hope to change that discourse. We're often referred to as the forgotten mourners
Yeah.
because everybody asks about our parents. If your sibling had children, they ask about their children or their spouse or anybody around that.
Yeah.
And you are the one person they do not ask about.
Yeah.
So a guest one told me there's more literature on pet loss than there is on sibling loss. And that opened my eyes because when that person said that initially, I said, maybe we're not supposed to be grieving this much. Maybe there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
I internalized that question.
Yeah.
And so I started believing that maybe my grief was a little exaggerated. Like maybe,
Yeah.
maybe I need to tone it down a little bit.
Right.
So when I went to grief groups, the few that I found at the time specific to sibling loss, a lot of the siblings, adult siblings in the groups said, "I'm so angry at my sibling. I hate this person. They left me." That was
Mm.
the big,
Yeah.
like, "They left me. They shouldn't have done that," especially if it was through either addiction or suicide or some other,
Yeah.
um, that type of loss. So, I was even more shocked because I love my brother, and
Yeah.
we had a great relationship. Wasn't perfect, but I accepted the fullness of who he was. And I never, not once, not ever blamed him or thought he did this to us. So to hear that
Wow.
the way I felt about him was also the exception. So
Yeah.
my grief as a sibling is an exception. And within that space, the way I feel about his passing is also an exception. I started to think, wow, either I'm doing this really wrong
Yeah.
or there's something I'm not understanding here. Like there's I don't understand this.
Yeah.
That's when I got curious and I started researching on my own, looking up information about sibling loss, about grief. I got a certification on
Mhm.
what grief is and grief care. And it was all to better understand why there's this discrepancy between what I'm experiencing
Yeah.
and the external feedback that I'm getting.
Yeah. I so appreciate you, and I hate that it's so often what people are missing that fuels them to then go and be the person who carries the torch light,
Yeah.
to bring that to the world. Um, and I think I speak on behalf of all of us that we're so grateful that you're bringing that to light. And it's why your podcast, my podcast, our peers, the books, everything, all the conversations that are happening for all the different kinds of losses, including which we do on this show, I meant you do too, the non-death losses. It's like if you don't see it out in the world,
Yeah.
in your family, in your community, in your church or synagogue or mosque, on TV shows, in media, in songs, then our default is to say, "It must just be me,"
Yeah.
right? And so this is why these kinds of conversations are really important. I appreciate you helping us understand both the agency in which you reclaimed against the stigma. It was like, "Not today, stigma," I mean, I know it
Not
wasn't that
today, not
simple.
not
Not
ever. Yeah.
not today, not ever, but, that kind of like, "You're not gonna do
Right.
that." And also the sort of both and of, sudden, not sudden, I'm still grappling with, my brother is not here in
Yeah.
body anyways. I love that you talked about dreams and signs. I've had Susan Graw on the show who explored a lot about, the beautiful signs and how we might connect with folks, in whatever form they are. Oh, I'm curious to ask you this question. I mean, there's so many questions I'm curious to ask you, but I think I said to you off the air, I was just in this beautiful poetry workshop with, Rosemary Watola Traumer, who will be on the show
Mhm.
this season as well. And somebody in the small group conversation had brought up this quote by E.B. White that just keeps resonating for me. And it made me think about what you know for sure.
Yeah.
And I use that word in air quotes, but, post the death of Joseph and all the work that you've done. But the quote is, and I'm paraphrasing here, folks, so please bear with me, but um, I wake in the morning torn between a desire to save the world and a desire to savor the world.
Mm.
And I wonder, what does savoring the world look like now in the life of the after of the death of Joseph versus maybe before?
Yeah. That's a beautiful question, and thank you
Yeah,
for asking it, and also for mentioning Rosemary because her work was instrumental in helping me, uh, get
yeah,
to the answer that I'm about to share.
yeah.
I spent 3 this is gonna make me sound a little out there. It's okay. I've
All
also met other people
we
who
listen and we don't judge, as the
we
little social
listen and we
media
don't
phrase
judge,
goes,
okay? I spent the first 3 years listening. I needed answers. It was a
Yeah,
desperate search for answers, desperate. And like I said, I didn't find it in scripture. I didn't
yeah,
find it in science. I didn't find it in my traditional coping mechanisms. I went to my grandfather's house one day and I see this book. I'm just staring off into space. When you're grieving, you're doing a
yeah,
lot of staring off into space. And I noticed this book that says, it was open to a chapter and it says the tunnel. I'm like, what is that? It caught my attention. So I open the book and I start reading the tunnel and I'm like, what tunnel? And it's about this woman. I started to realize it was about this woman's recount of a near death experience. And I happened to open it midway, so I didn't read the beginning of the book. I'm just like this, and this woman shares her experience about how she met, quote unquote, met Jesus. And I'm angry reading this. And I'm like,
yeah,
this woman thinks she met the Jesus? Like, what? Who is she? Like, how dare she? Is this? And
yeah,
she calls it like she's crazy. So, but I couldn't put it down. So I'm like reading, reading, reading. And it was the first time that I heard something different. I'd never heard of NDEs,
yeah,
near death experiences. I never heard of these spiritual encounters. I like I said, my initial response was angry because I was like, this is
yeah,
blasphemous. This is like horrible. And yet it piqued a curiosity within to maybe know a little bit more about what she's talking about because she claims that she could visit ancestors and people who had passed on. And I said, well, this woman alleges that
yeah,
she could have this connection. Again, you are in first year grief, the days after the loss, in a fog, scrambling for air, and this felt like a breath of air.
yeah,
It didn't make any sense, but it was something that was a different messaging than I was hearing before. So I started looking up, near death stories and YouTube, and I found IANS, which is the International Association for Near Death Studies, the University of Virginia. I forgot the name of the professor who researches near death studies. Is Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work, but also with I'm forgetting his name, another person who was her contemporary who also studied, patients who had heart attacks, and were resuscitated, and they
yeah,
claim that they had near-death
yeah,
experiences. All of these things, right? That along with some people who said, ask for the signs and experience the signs, and then experiencing the dreams, I started to see like there might be more than meets the eye here, right? And for 3 years, I searched for answers and I heard these stories, and all of a sudden I was convinced. It was almost like this was my new quote unquote religion. I'm using the
Yeah.
term loosely here.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like, this is what I'm believing. This is the truth. I'm onto something here,
Yeah.
you know? And then after all this time listening to this information, I did like a full circle where I went from life is so much bigger than this, and we're spirit in human form, and we have this mission, and da da da. Da. And I went this
Yeah.
full circle and I said, yes, and at the end of the day,
Yeah.
I am in this human body.
Yeah.
This is the body that was given to me. And my primary focus by divine design, whatever that means to you, is to be human. And it's to be this human through
Yeah.
this body and this experience and this existence that I embody. So, as much as I would like the answers to be spiritual, with some were great things to know and experience, at the end of the day, we are this and we are this moment. And
Yeah.
between that, my brother's LLP's theory of like living
Yeah.
in the moment, savoring this sunshine, not tomorrow's, this one today, this full moon, this snack that he really enjoyed his snacks, like
Yeah.
this one snack that he's eating in the moment, it dawned on me that the most important thing you could ever do in this moment is be right here, like where your feet are.
Yeah.
That is not easy
It's
most
a
of the
practice.
time.
I mean, it's life is a practice, by the way. We'll be right back with more of this beautiful conversation. Now, as much as I love hosting this show, and I absolutely love it, what I love perhaps even more is being with grievers, both online and especially in person. Throughout the year, I'm grateful for the chance to offer grief support to individuals, bring grief education to organizations creating grief smart cultures, and inspire audiences at large events like TEDx and Endwell. And all of that happens because of listeners like you. As we head into 2026, I'm really excited to share that I'll be offering more events and retreats. And what's top of mind for me today is a beautiful week-long retreat I'll be leading this April, where your sorrow will be held and witnessed through sacred practices in the healing embrace of the natural world at Wilcatica in the heart of Peru's Sacred Valley. You heard me right, Peru. The retreat is for individuals, couples, even small groups seeking a tender holding space for their sorrow. And it's open to all forms of loss, personal, community, even collective grief. There are still a few spots left, so if you'd like to learn more and reserve your spot, visit lisakeefauver.com after today's episode. That's Lisa, KEEFAUVER.com.
What I do now is, and I learned this from Rosemary, is living with the questions.
Yeah.
It's, you know what? You don't need all the answers. You were not meant to have all the answers.
Yeah.
You are missing the point of life if you focus only on finding the answers. It doesn't mean don't ever look for answers. It just means this obsession of
Yeah.
needing to know, let it go. And
Yeah.
instead ask, and I learned this from you, what else is here? And
Yeah.
what else is in this moment? And that's another thing that Rosemary, since we touched on her earlier, uh, I learned from her because I shared this story. She lost her son, and her son also liked nature, and she shared a story about a pebble. And my brother used to carry this pebble in his pocket for years. And we're talking about a person who lost his ID all the time, his phone all the time, his watch, his head if it was not attached to his body. Like he lost
Yeah.
everything, but he never lost this pebble in his pocket. And it's a pebble that he got in Utah when he was out in like a wilderness thing in Utah. And we always asked him, what does it mean? And he always said, it's for me to know. It's for me to know. You're never going to know. And my mom one day joking, this was a joke. She said,
Yeah.
what if something happens to you and we never found out what the meaning of this pebble was? Lo and behold, something did happen and we
Yeah.
never found out what the meaning of this pebble was. We still have this pebble.
Mm.
And it like tortured me not knowing what it meant. So I shared this story with Rosemary and she says, isn't that a beautiful gift that he left you with wonderment? He always wanted you to wonder. He gave you the gift of wonderment. And that just shifted
Yeah.
everything for me. Speaking of pebbles, it like released this weight off my shoulders.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm going to live with wonderment.
Yeah.
And whenever I don't have the answers or I feel like I need an answer, I'm reminded of the pebble. No, you don't.
Yeah.
It's okay to live with the questions.
Nina, that is so beautiful. Listeners, I hope you really soaked that in. It reminds me of the sort of Rilke live into the questions, and maybe someday along the path, again, paraphrasing, you'll stumble upon the answers. I ask that question, not every time, but often of my guests, not as in fact, in the opposite of everything happens for a reason BS. Um, And in that part of what I think we do as we metabolize our grief, which is what we're doing, right? This is the human inheritance, as Francis Weller sometimes talks about it, of metabolizing our grief, is to begin to discern there's more complexity, that with deep grief, if we allow ourselves to the courage to face it, then there's deep wonderment, there's deep delight, there's deep awe, right? I think about that. And that quote, the one about saving or savoring, really made me think about this is our inheritance if we're willing to personally and collectively create a more grief literate world. A container for our grief is that there is that possibility to savor more. And I definitely am somebody who lives that. And I think I was already a decently, you know, present person. And that's to say it's the both and. So if you're tuning in and thinking I'm not there yet, or that's not a place to live, no, we absolutely can't live um, in that sort of idealized space or that deeply cynical space. I was, again, heard this morning someone refer to Parker Palmer's expression of the tragic gap, sort of the in between, right? And
Yeah.
how we have to move in between those spaces. And I think that is the practice, what you're talking about, like this practice of wonderment means some days you're gonna maybe slip into the space, but I really want to know what the pebble is for. Right? And that's okay too. And then there's the recognition of what is getting so hooked into the answer, keeping me from seeing.
Yeah.
And also, I think we sometimes presume that there is an answer.
Mm. Yeah.
And what are we missing? And maybe what questions aren't we asking?
Right.
Yeah. I'm not sure if you're willing to go there, but I was curious because not only have you lived this and worked with your grief in the wake of your brother's death and personally, and then of course in the work that you do through the show and others things, um, is that you've recently had your own near-death experience,
So to
eh,
speak. Yeah.
so to speak. I mean, not
Mhm.
quite, but you've had a very serious encounter
Yeah.
with the fragility of life. Maybe we'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And I
No.
wonder, yeah, I wonder, you do or don't have to explain the details, but I wonder as you add that to the list of the sort of story of your life, what have you learned from that? Or what are you learning from what that experience was? Yeah.
Thank you. So I recently experienced what I think was anaphylactic reaction, there we go, to shellfish. I was at home and having dinner with some relatives. One of my relatives warmed up a plate that included some shellfish. the smell alone, and this is an important detail, the
Yeah.
smell alone triggered a physical response in me. And I had never been allergic to anything in my life
Yeah.
before. I did notice a little bit of sensitivity around shellfish, like my knuckles itch or I would get a little flush, but nothing major.
Yeah.
And yet the moment I inhaled the vapors, I started feeling a weird tingle. Long story short, because I wrote an article about this with all the
Yes.
details, and maybe you could share that with your
Yes.
audience.
Yeah, on your Substack, I know, yeah.
Mhm. And I ended up, rationalizing what happened. I was like, maybe this is an anxiety attack. Maybe I'm just stressed out. Maybe, until my throat started closing up. And I felt like my breathing was labored. I ended up driving myself to the hospital because there was nobody to take me that day. And as I drove there, it dawned on me that I wasn't sure if I was going to make it to the hospital because it was
Mm,
getting very dire.
yeah.
And in my split-second decision making, I decided to drive in a way that would cause attention in case something happened to me because I was
Mm,
immediately thinking I had this impending sense of doom,
yeah.
and it was like time was fast and slow at the same time. I don't know how to explain it,
Yeah. Yeah.
where my thoughts were racing and I thought, "My goodness, is this what my brother felt when he died? This is terrifying."
Mm,
Like I said, "Was this what his last moment was?" Like
yeah.
sheer panic.
Yeah.
That made me even more panicky.
Yeah.
Then I thought, "Should I call my parents and say goodbye? What would I even say to them? How do I explain this?
Yeah.
Should I call my husband?" Like, what there's all these
Yeah.
thoughts of, like, "What do I
Yeah.
do? What do I do?" as I'm
Yeah.
trying to drive to the emergency room. And I even decided to drive to the emergency room because one of my guests on the podcast, she lost her daughter to anaphylaxis.
Okay.
She had been born very highly allergic to multiple things. They had she was 9 years old. They had figured out ways to keep her safe until it didn't work because now I know that the nature of allergies is it something new could trigger it even
Yeah.
if you weren't allergic before. And you can develop a severe allergic reaction even if you've never had
Yeah.
a reaction before. So I end up in the hospital and by myself. The staff looked horrified to see me. They just grabbed me. I just remember a lady grabbing me by the arm and saying, "You're safe now, honey. You're okay."
Mm,
They put me in the bed. They said, "I need a bed. I need a bed. I need a bed." And we passed a few beds in the ER, and I remember she said, "This one," and that was 11, bed 11. And I knew I was going to be okay in that moment because my brother died on 9/11, and that's a number I associate with my brother. So,
mm,
they do their thing, get my
yeah.
vitals back, get me back. And the nurse, my parents arrive. This is like I'm speeding up
Yes.
everything that
Yeah,
happened
yeah.
here, but, like, my parents arrive, and my dad comes in, and the nurse's name was Joe, and I say, "Hey, Joe, meet Joe, my dad, Joe." And they kind of made this joke about, like, "Hey, Joe, it's nice to meet another
Yeah.
Joe." The nurse says, "Well, my real name is Joseph," and it was Czechoslovakian for Joseph. So I said, "You've got to be kidding me. This is
Your
amazing."
brother
Of
is
course it is.
just
Thank you so much.
showing up. Yeah.
So between this, the guest, the mother of the guest that I had on my podcast, learning about her daughter's anaphylaxis, that's what got me to get in the car and go to the ER and stop questioning what it was so that I
Yeah.
could just be okay. The fact that I made it to the ER, the fact that the nurse was named Joseph, and
Mm,
the fact that everything was okay,
yeah.
that gave me just a new perspective on how, yet again, life is here today and could potentially be gone
Yeah.
tomorrow. Fast forward a few weeks, that was an incredibly traumatizing experience. I think I was in shock for like about a good 2 weeks, and I know we interacted a few days after
Yes.
that. I was in
Yeah.
pure shock. I
Yeah.
don't, I had to like assimilate everything that happened because it was truly terrifying. And since this is an important detail because something I've learned since is I assumed I knew for sure I'm allergic to shellfish. Now I need to learn how to use EpiPens, change my whole life around, learn about food allergies.
Yeah.
Turns out I did a bunch of tests. I'm not allergic to anything. All the tests were negative, including shellfish, and they did them twice initially and a third one through blood work. I'm not, according to the results, allergic to anything. So now there's more tests with like spontaneous, like self-induced And there's all these other things,
Yeah.
essentially question marks, question marks. So, like, relief on the, I
Yeah.
guess, no food allergy side, that's wonderful. And I actually updated the article with this information, but I decided to leave it on because
Yeah.
food allergy related anaphylaxis needs to be a more public thing. People need to understand the nature of it, how
Yeah.
quickly it escalates, how incredibly life-threatening it is. So even though right now it doesn't seem that that was the cause, that
Yeah.
was what I thought it was at the moment,
Yeah.
um, I left the article there because I think it helps bring more awareness.
Yeah.
And also, while we find answers, this is part of the lesson, don't get ahead of yourself. While we find answers, um, maybe it is some type of allergy to something else that I'm not aware of, right?
Yeah. A non-food maybe item in your home or who knows. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, well, yes, we did interact a little bit in the midst of that. And I I just know from having had some health scares, and listeners know I've just on the other side of cancer treatment. Um, you sort of think when the worst thing happens, when, the someone you love dies, you think, okay, well, I'm okay, and then something else happens and it can tap into old grief. You think maybe I could be prepared to handle this because I've handled something worse. And so I just always like to ask people questions like, what did it bring up for you? What did you learn? Like, what do you know more? Because um, I know for me, my own health scare had me returning to lessons I thought I had learned, you know, after my husband died, and then even after my friend Joe died, and for me, one of them was asking for and letting people help you.
Yes.
Oof, that's a practice, let me just tell you. But speaking of savoring life, like, if not for what? It's the people
Right.
that these are the relationships that we have. This is what we are present to. So, yeah, yeah,
So your wisdom in that
yeah,
helped me a lot because I would usually internalize and keep things to myself. I didn't want to worry my parents.
yeah,
I ended up staying, my husband was out of town, so I ended up staying with my parents because I
yeah,
heard you could have like a secondary post-event reaction, and I just didn't feel comfortable being by myself. So I went to their house, and normally I would just keep everything to myself and minimize it and say, I'm okay, it's fine, don't worry, I'll be fine. Fine is a four-letter F word.
it sure is, and listeners know I love an F word, but not that one. Okay, go
Not that
ahead.
one.
Yeah,
That's a really bad one.
that's not
So
a good one.
so I decided to, in that spirit, like you said, accept help. It's one thing to ask for it, and it's another to learn to receive it, and I
Yeah,
learned that
those are
from
2
you.
different things, listeners. Are you hearing that?
Yeah,
You can ask for it, and then when you refuse to receive it, it's useless. So, okay, yeah,
yeah. So I decided to share it honestly without being alarmist. I was just
yeah,
like, this I think this hit me harder than I expected. The part of the shock is not just the scare, but the understanding that it just life never ceases to amaze me how it could flip literally one instant to the other for
yeah,
good and for
yeah,
stressful, not so great situations.
yeah,
So, learning to say the things out loud as they are, not minimize them, allowing them to take care of me, even as an adult, allowing people within my community to show up the way that they needed to or wanted to as
yeah,
well. Usually I would say, no, I don't need anything. I'm fine. It's again,
yeah,
fine. So just allowing and saying, okay, no, you want to give me this. You want to send me this. You want to show up in this way. You want to listen. You want to, thank you. Thank you
yeah,
so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I would do the same for them. And it was nice to receive it.
yeah,
And just that reminder that we're not alone. Also, yes, I kept replaying like it could have turned out so differently.
yeah,
Um, what if my parents lost both of their children? I think that is the biggest
yeah,
point of fear that it has brought up because they're really good parents. Like, they don't deserve
yeah, yeah,
anything that's happened. No parents deserve this. There's
no,
no deserving here. But,
yeah,
that feeling of, man, that's a lot
yeah,
for two people who really were wonderful parents. So, just for them to, I know that that was going through their mind for sure.
I'm
So, seeing them trying to not show me that side, even though I was like, "It's okay. I know we're
Yeah.
all scared here."
Yeah.
So those feelings of can you trust your body? I have now more questions, and this is not in the living with wonderment type of situation. This is more like I need to understand what's happening in this
Yeah.
situation health-wise. I had another health scare after that, so just health being front and center, realizing
Yeah.
that you can have so many quote unquote problems or perceived problems, but if you have your health, you truly are in a place where everything else is solvable, figure
Yeah.
outable.
Yeah.
Um, but if you are struggling with health, health is your number one problem.
Yeah.
And it really takes over all of your life
Yeah.
when things are not okay. So my compassion goes to people who are dealing with health issues, with newly found health issues, with chronic issues, with all the things, because it really is truly life altering.
Yeah.
And also the reason I left the article up, anybody with food allergies, you are so validated. I want to validate your experience
Yeah.
so much. You are not too much.
Yeah.
There is not enough resources out there for you. This
Yeah.
world is not built for people with food allergies or any allergies really, but especially food allergies. And so my heart goes out to you. I believe in the amount of advocacy that's needed there. I was not aware of it until I
Yeah.
was. It's really, really life altering for a lot of people, especially, you know, more common things like wheat, dairy, those are
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
So my heart goes out to anybody struggling with that. And again, just a deep reverence for life and what a gift it is to be here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, life's little pleasures.
Pleasures.
Wherever you are, listener, early in your grief or later on, whether you're someone who is experiencing precarious health, current or chronic or longstanding, I really do believe, not in every moment. We can't possibly live in any one static place. But that the invitation to pay attention to life's little pleasures is um, really a balm to the scars and the wounds that we carry in our grief and in our illness. So, Nina, I love that you brought Joseph into our lives and that you're in my life, and now you're in our both of you are in our listeners' lives, and that I think the invitation, everyone, is to maybe take some time after this podcast and get curious about what your life's little pleasures are right now. Thank you, Nina Rodriguez, for joining me on Grief is a Sneaky Bitch podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for holding the space, for bringing Joseph in, and for your beautiful questions and for being you. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Friends, thank you so much for spending this time with us today. I hope you learned something new, or perhaps just felt seen or acknowledged in your own grief. Or maybe you feel more equipped to show up for someone grieving the death of their sibling, too. If you loved this episode, we'd so appreciate it if you took just a few minutes to head to the Grief is a Sneaky Bitch show page on Apple Podcasts or on YouTube if you're watching us. Leave a 5-star rating and write a review about what the show meant to you. Until next time, my friends, I see you, I hear you, and I'm holding you in my heart.